The morning shift alarm rang across Station Alpha 7 like it had every day for the past 15 years. But this time nobody answered. Commander Zethek of the Galactic Council Defense Force stood in the empty control room and felt something cold settle in his stomach. The humans were supposed to be here. They were always here. The station ran on Earth Standard Time because humans had built it and humans had always operated it. But the humans were gone. 3 months had passed since Ambassador Lisa Carter had walked into the council chambers on Nexus Prime and delivered what everyone thought was a joke. She had placed a simple datapad on Chancellor Vextar's desk and announced that humanity was resigning from the Galactic Council effective immediately. The room had erupted in laughter. The Zeltharians had found it particularly amusing. After all, what could humans possibly do without the guidance and protection of superior alien civilizations? Lisa had waited for the laughter to die down before speaking again. Her voice had been calm and professional. We are pursuing other opportunities and will be relocating to regions better suited to our development. All human personnel will be withdrawn from council space within 90 days. We thank you for the opportunity to serve. Chancellor Vextar had waved a dismissive hand. Very well. Don't let the airlock hit you on your way out. More laughter had followed. The humans were useful laborers and decent enough engineers, but hardly essential. Let them go play in the outer rim if they wanted to. The galaxy would continue just fine without them. Now Zethak stared at the dark control panels and wondered if they had all made a terrible mistake. Station Alpha 7 was one of 17 defense posts that formed a protective ring around the Council's core worlds. For decades, these stations had been humanity's responsibility. They had volunteered for the duty when other species had deemed it too boring or too dangerous. Humans seemed to enjoy the isolation and the technical challenges. The station's main computer was still running, but barely. Warning lights flashed across every board. Life support was functioning on backup power. The defensive shields were down to 30%. Most concerning of all, the long-range sensors had gone completely offline 2 days ago. Without those sensors, the station was blind to anything approaching from deep space. Zethak had brought a team of Vorthon technicians with him. The Vorthons were logical and methodical. If anyone could figure out how to operate human-built systems, it would be them. But as he watched them struggle with the interfaces, he began to understand the scope of the problem. The control systems are unlike anything in our databases, reported Chief Technician Mordan. The humans appear to have used intuitive rather than logical design principles. Nothing follows standard galactic protocols. Zethak moved to the communications array. He had been trying to contact the other defense stations for hours. Station Beta 3 had responded yesterday with a brief message saying they were experiencing technical difficulties. Station Gamma 12 had gone silent 4 days ago. As for the rest, he was beginning to suspect they were all dark. The humans had left, behind detailed technical manuals for their equipment, but the manuals assumed a level of background knowledge that other species apparently lacked. Every solution referenced 10 other systems. Every system connected to 20 others. It was like trying to understand a vast web when you could only see one strand at a time. "Sir," called one of the Vorthons from the sensor station, "I have managed to activate short-range detection, but I am finding something troubling." Zethak hurried over. The technician pointed at a display showing the local star system. 17 cargo ships were scheduled to arrive this week from the mining colonies. According to the logs, only 3 have reported in. The others are simply missing. This was not good news. The mining colonies in the outer rim had been almost exclusively human operations. Humans seemed to thrive in the harsh conditions that other species found unbearable. They had volunteered to work the dangerous asteroid mines and the isolated planet crackers. In return, they had been given significant autonomy in how they managed those operations. "Have you tried contacting the colonies directly?" asked Zethak. "I have been attempting to do so for the past hour," replied the technician. "I am receiving no responses from any of the 17 mining facilities in this sector." A chill ran down Zethak's spine. 17 mining operations. Thousands of workers. All silent. He activated his personal communicator and tried to reach his superiors at council headquarters. The transmission went through, but the response he received was not reassuring. Commander Zethak, this is Admiral Kethmore. We are aware of the situation. Defense Stations 7 through 15 are all reporting similar problems. We are also losing contact with human settlements throughout the Outer Rim. Admiral, what are your orders? Asked Zethak. There was a pause before Kethmore replied. Continue your efforts to restore station operations. We are sending additional technical teams to assist you. In the meantime, we are redirecting patrol ships to cover the defense grid gaps. Zethak knew that was a temporary solution at best. The Council fleet was not designed for long-term border patrol duty. Their ships were built for prestige and intimidation, not for the grinding work of maintaining a defensive perimeter. Within weeks, they would be stretched too thin to maintain coverage. As if to confirm his fears, an urgent message appeared on the communications board. It was from Captain Veltar of the patrol ship Nexus Pride. Defense Command, we have arrived at the coordinates of mining station Kepler 7. The facility appears to be completely abandoned. No life signs detected. All equipment has been removed. It is as if 10,000 workers simply vanished. Zethak felt the cold in his stomach spread to his chest. He thought about the human colonies scattered across dozens of star systems. He thought about the cargo ships that should have arrived but hadn't. He thought about the empty mining stations and the dark defense posts. The humans had not fled in panic or desperation. They had planned this. They had systematically withdrawn from every position they held, taking their knowledge and their equipment with them. They had left behind only empty buildings and dead machinery, but where had they gone, and why had they been so careful to leave no trace of their destination? And more importantly, what did they know that the rest of the galaxy did not? Senator Claire Murphy sat in the emergency session of the Galactic Council and tried not to smile. She was the last human representative in council space, having volunteered to stay behind and handle the transition period. Around the great circular chamber, representatives from 43 different species argued with increasing desperation about who should take responsibility for the systems that humans had quietly managed for decades. 6 months had passed since humanity's departure, and the cracks in galactic civilization were becoming impossible to ignore. What had started as minor inconveniences had grown into major crises. Trade routes that had functioned smoothly for generations were collapsing. Supply chains that had seemed automatic were breaking down. Even basic communication between distant worlds was becoming unreliable. Chancellor Vextar pounded his ceremonial hammer on the podium. Order in the chamber. We will address each crisis systematically. His voice carried less authority than it had 6 months ago. The proud Zeltharian leader was beginning to look haggard. The first speaker was Trade Minister Korthan from the Merchant Guild. Honored council members, the situation with cargo distribution has become critical. 70% of our shipping routes depended on human-operated transfer stations. Without their coordination protocols, goods are piling up at hub worlds while outer colonies face shortages of basic necessities. Councillor HFY of the Vorten Collective stood next. The logical solution is to assign Vorten personnel to manage these distribution centers. We can analyze the human systems and implement more efficient alternatives. Claire had been to those distribution centers. She knew what the Vorthans would find. The humans had not just operated transfer stations. They had created living systems that adapted in real time to changing conditions. When a cargo ship was delayed, the human coordinators would instantly reroute dozens of other shipments to prevent bottlenecks. When a planet faced an emergency shortage, they would redirect supplies from 3 other worlds and arrange compensation trades. The Vorthans were brilliant at analyzing static systems, but they struggled with the constant improvisation that human logistics required. They wanted to create perfect schedules that would run without modification, but space was not perfect. Equipment failed. Ships broke down. Pirates attacked convoys. Weather disrupted planetary operations. The human approach had been to expect chaos and plan for flexibility. With respect, Councillor HFY, said Claire, the human logistics networks were not simply administrative systems. They were complex adaptive organisms that evolved continuously. Your people's analytical approach may not be suitable for the kind of real-time decision-making these operations require. Vorthan's large eyes fixed on her with something approaching irritation. Human systems are inherently inefficient due to their reliance on emotion and intuition. Proper logical analysis will improve performance significantly. Claire shrugged. You're welcome to try. She had learned months ago that warning the Council about the complexity of human systems only made them more determined to prove their superiority. They would have to discover the truth for themselves. The next crisis report came from Defense Minister Kethmore. The situation at our border defense installations continues to deteriorate. We have managed to restore basic functions at 7 of the 17 stations, but our technical teams report that the human-designed systems are incompatible with standard galactic technology. This was the part that fascinated Claire the most. Other species built their technology to impressive, galactic standards that emphasized compatibility and prestige. Every component had to interface perfectly with every other component. Every system had to follow established protocols. Every design had to be approved by committees of experts. Humans had ignored all of that. They built things that worked. When standard components were too expensive or too slow, they made their own. When established protocols created bottlenecks, they invented new ones. When expert committees said something was impossible, humans found a way to do it anyway. The result was technology that was more effective than anything else in the galaxy, but completely incomprehensible to species that had spent centuries following rigid design principles. The humans had essentially been running a parallel technological civilization that intersected with galactic society only at the user interface level. Perhaps the Krex Empire could provide military expertise for the defense stations, suggested Chancellor Vextar. General Korthak of the Krex Empire stood slowly. His massive frame was covered in ceremonial armor that had been polished to mirror brightness. The Krex Empire does not concern itself with the technical maintenance of equipment. We fight, others repair. That was the problem in a nutshell. Every species in the Council had specialized in what they considered prestigious work. The Zeltharians ruled and made grand speeches. The Vorthons analyzed and created theoretical frameworks. The Krex fought glorious battles. The Beta Z traded and negotiated profitable deals. The humans had done everything else. They had maintained the machines. They had coordinated the logistics. They had solved the endless small problems that kept civilization functioning. They had worked in the background while other species took credit for their accomplishments. What about asking our human representative for assistance? Suggested Councillor Velshi from the Andorian delegation. All eyes turned to Claire. She had been expecting this moment for weeks. I'm afraid that's not possible. I have no authority to speak for humanity in technical matters. My role here is purely ceremonial now. But surely you can provide basic information about human systems, pressed Chancellor Vextar. Claire spread her hands apologetically. The humans who designed and operated those systems took their knowledge with them. I'm a political liaison, not an engineer. I know how to file reports and schedule meetings, not how to run a cargo distribution network or maintain a defense station. What she did not say was that she had received regular updates from the human Exodus fleet. She knew exactly where they had gone and what they were doing. The reports she received made the Council's current crisis seem like a minor administrative inconvenience compared to what humanity was discovering in the void between galaxies. But the Council was not ready to hear about that yet. They still believed that humans were a junior species that had gotten lucky with a few useful inventions. They could not imagine that humanity had been deliberately hiding their true capabilities for decades. We need to establish contact with the human settlements, declared Chancellor Vextar. They left in haste. Surely they will be willing to negotiate a return once they realize how much the galaxy needs their services. Claire almost laughed at that. The Council still believed that humans had left because they were frustrated or seeking better opportunities. They had no idea that humanity's departure had been planned for years. They had no concept of the vast project that humans had been secretly preparing in the dark spaces beyond the galactic rim. I can attempt to forward any messages you wish to send, offered Claire. Though I should warn you that response times may be considerable given the distances involved. What she did not mention was that the last reliable estimates put the human fleet approximately 50,000 light-years beyond the edge of the galaxy and moving outward at an accelerating pace, using propulsion technology that the Council did not know existed. Around the chamber, the arguments continued. Species that had cooperated smoothly for centuries were beginning to blame each other for the growing crisis. The careful balance that had held the Council together was starting to fracture under the stress of trying to replace human contributions. Claire watched it all with a mixture of sadness and pride. Sadness that it had come to this. Pride that her species had finally decided to stop hiding their true potential behind a mask of harmless competence. The ship that approached Nexus Prime looked wrong in ways that made the Council's sensors struggle to process it. Captain Jake Morrison's vessel seemed to slip between dimensions as it moved, appearing solid one moment and translucent the next. Its hull reflected starlight in patterns that hurt to look at directly, and it left no wake in space despite moving at impossible speeds. 1 year had passed since humanity's departure, and the Galactic Council was barely holding together. Food shortages plagued the core worlds. Trade had collapsed between the inner and outer systems. Civil unrest was spreading as citizens began to realize that their comfortable lives had depended on human labor that was no longer available. Chancellor Vextar received Morrison's request for an audience with a mixture of relief and wounded pride. Perhaps the humans had finally realized their mistake and were ready to return with apologies and reasonable terms for reintegration. Morrison entered the council chamber alone, but he moved with a confidence that had not been there before. His appearance had changed in subtle ways that were difficult to define. His eyes seemed deeper, as if they had seen distances that stretched beyond normal space. His voice carried harmonics that made the translator systems work harder than they should have needed to. Honored members of the Galactic Council, Morrison began, I come with a final offer from humanity. Chancellor Vextar leaned forward in his seat. Captain Morrison, we are pleased to see that your people have reconsidered their hasty departure. What terms do you propose for your return? Morrison smiled, and the expression contained sadness mixed with something that might have been pity. We are not returning, Chancellor. We are offering you the opportunity to join us. The chamber erupted in confused murmurs. Join them where? Join them in what? Morrison waited for silence before continuing. In the void between galaxies, we have discovered things that make your greatest achievements look like children's toys. We have learned to work with dark matter the way you work with ordinary metals. We have found energy sources that make stars seem dim. We have encountered forms of consciousness that exist in dimensions you cannot imagine. Morrison gestured, and holographic images filled the chamber. The council members gasped as they saw structures that dwarfed solar systems. Ring-shaped constructions that could have held entire star clusters rotated slowly in the cosmic deep. Ships that phased in and out of visible reality moved between them like living things. This is impossible, declared Counselor Hexvar of the Vorthan Collective. The energy requirements alone would exceed the output of 1,000 stars. You are thinking in terms of matter-based physics, replied Morrison. We have moved beyond those limitations. The beings we encountered in the void taught us that consciousness itself is a fundamental force of the universe. When properly focused, it can reshape reality at the quantum level. The images shifted to show humans working alongside beings of pure energy. The energy creatures had no fixed form, appearing sometimes as geometric patterns of light and sometimes as flowing rivers of conscious thought. They moved through solid matter as easily as through empty space, and their very presence seemed to bend the laws of physics around them. We call them the architects, Morrison explained. They have been traveling between galaxies for millions of years, building structures that facilitate the evolution of consciousness itself. They were drawn to humanity because we possessed something most species lack. And what is that? Asked Chancellor Vextar with barely concealed skepticism. Adaptability combined with imagination, Morrison replied. Most species develop along predictable paths. They discover fire, then metals, then basic energy manipulation, then space travel. They follow the same steps in the same order and reach the same limitations. Humans chose a different path. The images showed human settlements that defied easy categorization. Some existed partially in normal space and partially in dimensions that folded reality into impossible geometries. Others seemed to be made of crystallized time itself, their structures changing constantly while remaining fundamentally stable. We offer you the chance to join us in this expansion beyond the galaxy, Morrison continued. But you would come as junior partners in an enterprise that stretches across cosmic distances. You would need to abandon your rigid hierarchies and your assumptions about how the universe works. General Korthak of the Krex Empire stood abruptly. The Krex Empire bows to no one. We will not become subordinates to escaped human colonists who have allied themselves with unknown aliens. Morrison's expression did not change, but the air in the chamber seemed to grow heavier. The architects are not unknown to us. We have been studying their works for decades. Some of the technology you attributed to human innovation was actually based on their designs. That statement sent shockwaves through the chamber. The humans had been secretly studying alien technology for decades, while pretending to be primitive newcomers to galactic civilization. You have been deceiving us, accused Chancellor Vexitar. We have been protecting ourselves, Morrison corrected. Your species have a tendency to suppress or destroy anything that threatens your perceived superiority. If we had revealed our true capabilities earlier, you would have attempted to control or eliminate us. The truth of that statement was uncomfortable, but undeniable. The Council had a long history of restricting the development of younger species to prevent them from becoming competitive threats. Show them what follows behind us, said a new voice from the chamber entrance. Claire Murphy entered, but like Morrison, she had changed. Her presence seemed to extend beyond her physical form, and when she moved, reality rippled around her like water disturbed by a stone. Morrison nodded, and the holographic display shifted again. This time the images showed something that made several council members cry out in fear. Vast geometric shapes moved through space, but they were not ships or stations. They were holes in reality itself, consuming everything they touched and leaving nothing behind. The architects warned us about the gardeners, Morrison explained. They are entities from outside this universe who periodically visit galaxies to remove civilizations that have stopped growing. They prune away stagnant societies to make room for new forms of consciousness to evolve. The images showed entire star systems simply ceasing to exist as the geometric shapes passed through them. Billions of lives ended without violence or struggle. They were simply edited out of reality as if they had never been. The gardeners are coming to this galaxy, Claire said quietly. They will arrive within 3 years. Species that demonstrate growth and adaptability will be preserved and relocated. Those that cling to old patterns will be removed. This is preposterous, declared Chancellor Vexitar. Even if such beings existed, what makes you think we would be targeted for removal? Morrison gestured, and the display showed the Galactic Council's own territory. Statistical analyses scrolled past, showing centuries of unchanging social structures, technological stagnation, and rigid adherence to tradition. You have not truly grown in over 2,000 years, Morrison said bluntly. You have spread across space, but you have not evolved. You follow the same social patterns, use the same political structures, and think the same thoughts as your ancestors. From the gardener's perspective, you are a dead end. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Finally, Chancellor Vexitar spoke. What would joining you require? Complete abandonment of your current social systems, Claire replied. Willingness to have your consciousness expanded beyond its current limitations. Acceptance that you would become the least advanced species in a community that spans multiple galaxies. The silence stretched longer this time. Finally, General Korthak spoke for all of them. The Council does not accept ultimatums from inferior species. We reject your offer. Morrison and Claire exchanged a look that seemed to communicate volumes, without words. We understand, Morrison said sadly. We had to try. As they turned to leave, Claire delivered one final warning. The gardeners do not negotiate. They do not show mercy. When they arrive, we will not be here to help you resist them. Choose wisely how you spend your remaining time. Dr. Amanda Foster stood in the observation deck of Research Station Omega, and watched the collapse of galactic civilization through her monitoring equipment. 2 years had passed since humanity's departure, and what had begun as inconvenience had become catastrophe. The woman who had once studied alien psychology for the Galactic Research Institute now found herself documenting the death spiral of the very species she had spent her career trying to understand. The latest reports painted a picture of systematic failure across all levels of Council society. 17 member species had formally withdrawn from the Galactic Alliance, unable to maintain their technological infrastructure without human support. Food riots had broken out on 12 core worlds as agricultural distribution networks collapsed. Even basic interstellar communication was becoming unreliable, as the relay stations that humans had maintained fell into disrepair. Amanda's research had taken on a grim new focus. She was now studying the psychology of civilizational collapse, watching proud species that had ruled space for millennia struggle to perform tasks that human teenagers had managed routinely. The data she collected painted a devastating picture of dependence that none of the alien species had been willing to acknowledge. The Zeltharians provided the most dramatic example. For over 3,000 years, they had been considered the galaxy's master engineers, creators of the massive space habitats that housed billions of citizens. But Amanda's investigation had revealed the truth. The Zeltharians had inherited their technology from a predecessor species that had vanished. Mysteriously 5 millennia ago, they had never actually understood how their own machines worked. For centuries, they had maintained their engineering reputation by relying on human technicians to solve complex problems while taking credit for the solutions. When human teams recommended modifications or improvements, Zeltharian supervisors would implement the changes and present them as their own innovations. The humans had played along because it gave them access to advanced alien technology to study and reverse engineer. Now, without human support, Zeltharian engineering was revealed as an elaborate fraud. Their master engineers could operate their ancestors' machines, but could not repair them when they broke down. Their greatest innovations had been human ideas translated through Zeltharian pride. Their technological supremacy had been an illusion maintained by species they had considered inferior. The situation with the Vorthan collective was different, but equally devastating. The Vorthans were genuinely brilliant at theoretical analysis and abstract mathematics. Their logical frameworks had provided the foundation for much of galactic science and philosophy. But they had never been able to bridge the gap between theory and practice. Humans had served as translators between Vorthan logic and real-world applications. When the Vorthans developed elegant mathematical models for optimizing trade routes, humans figured out how to implement those models in the chaotic reality of interstellar commerce. When Vorthan scientists created theoretical frameworks for exotic physics, human engineers found ways to turn those theories into working technology. Without humans to handle the practical implementation, Vorthan logic had become useless perfectionism. They could design flawless systems that worked beautifully in computer simulations, but failed catastrophically when exposed to the unpredictable variables of real space. Their attempts to take over human-managed operations had resulted in rigid procedures that collapsed at the first sign of unexpected circumstances. The Krex Empire had fared worst of all. Their military culture had been built around the assumption that other species would handle all non-combat responsibilities. Krex warriors were magnificent fighters, but they had no idea how to maintain their own equipment, coordinate their own logistics, or even prepare their own food. Human support staff had managed every aspect of Krex military operations except the actual fighting. They had maintained the weapons, planned the supply chains, coordinated the communications networks, and even designed the battle strategies that Krex commanders claimed as their own tactical genius. Without human support, the mighty Krex Empire was revealed as a collection of skilled fighters who could not feed themselves or keep their weapons operational. Their great warships were stranded in space because no Krex understood how to operate the maintenance systems. Their feared legions were reduced to scavenging for supplies because their logistics networks had completely collapsed. Amanda's most disturbing discovery was how deliberately humans had hidden their true capabilities. Her research through old archives revealed evidence of systematic deception dating back decades. Humans had consistently underestimated their own achievements in official reports, while privately developing technologies that surpassed anything the Council possessed. The mining operations that humans had managed in the Outer Rim had not been simple extraction facilities. They had been research laboratories where humans experimented with exotic materials and energy sources. The cargo ships that humans operated had not been ordinary freighters. They had been disguised exploration vessels mapping regions of space that the Council had never bothered to investigate. Most shocking of all, the defense stations that humans had volunteered to staff had not been passive monitoring posts. They had been sophisticated sensor networks designed to detect threats from outside the galaxy. The humans had known something was coming long before they revealed it to the Council. Amanda was studying this data when her instruments detected something that made her blood freeze. The Outer Rim monitoring stations that she had been using to track refugee ships had gone completely silent. Not just the human-built stations that had failed months ago, but the newer Council replacements that had been hastily installed to fill the gaps. She activated her long-range sensors and scanned the edge of galactic space. What she found there defied rational explanation. Entire star systems that had been visible just days ago were now empty space, not destroyed or abandoned, but simply absent, as if they had never existed at all. Emergency communications flooded the research stations. Receivers, scout ships that had been dispatched to investigate the Outer Rim silence were sending frantic reports before their signals cut off abruptly. The few that managed to return spoke of shadows moving between stars and geometric shapes that hurt to perceive directly. Admiral Kethamor's voice crackled through the communication system with barely controlled panic. All stations, we have confirmed visual contact with unidentified objects approaching from galactic north. The objects do not conform to any known physical parameters. They appear to be consuming space itself as they advance. Amanda switched her instruments to maximum magnification and aimed them toward the coordinates the Admiral had provided. What she saw made her question her sanity. Massive geometric structures were moving through space in formation, but they were not made of any recognizable matter. They seemed to be holes in reality itself, regions where space-time had been folded into impossible configurations. As she watched, one of the structures passed through the location where the star system Epsilon Reticuli had been located. The system did not explode or collapse. It simply ceased to exist, leaving behind perfectly empty space with no trace that billions of lives had ever been there. The communication channels erupted with reports from across the Outer Rim. System after system was vanishing as the geometric entities advanced toward the galactic core. The pattern was methodical and purposeful, suggesting intelligence rather than natural disaster. Amanda thought about Captain Morrison's warning 2 years ago. He had spoken of gardeners who pruned stagnant civilizations to make room for new growth. At the time, it had seemed like an elaborate deception designed to manipulate the Council into accepting human terms. Now she realized it had been the truth. The entities approaching the galaxy were not invaders seeking conquest or resources. They were gardeners clearing away dead growth to prepare the soil for new life. And the Galactic Council, with its rigid hierarchies and millennia of unchanging tradition, had been marked for removal. Her instruments detected one final transmission from the advancing front. It was a Council scout ship making its last report before the geometric entities reached it. "This is Captain Velmore of the survey vessel Brightstar. The objects are not attacking us. They are simply editing us out of existence. Reality itself is being rewritten around us. Tell my family that I..." The transmission ended abruptly, and another star system vanished from Amanda's sensors. 3 years after humanity's quiet departure, Chancellor Vextar stood in the ruins of the Council chamber and faced the end of everything his species had built. Half the galaxy was gone, consumed by entities that treated matter and energy like outdated concepts to be discarded. The remaining Council fleets had proven as useless against the gardeners as children's toys would be against a hurricane. The geometric entities advanced with mechanical precision, erasing star systems in patterns that suggested vast intelligence, but no concern for the lives they were ending. They did not communicate, negotiate, or explain their actions. They simply removed civilizations that had stopped growing and moved on to the next target. Vexitar's personal communicator crackled with static as he tried once more to contact the scattered remnants of the Council fleet. Most ships had stopped, responding days ago. Those that remained operational were fleeing toward the Galactic Center in desperate hope that distance might provide temporary safety. Then something impossible happened. A transmission cut through the static with perfect clarity, as if the Gardener's reality-distorting presence meant nothing to its technology. "This is Admiral Lucy Patterson of the Human Deep Space Fleet," a calm voice announced. "To our former Council colleagues, we extend greetings from beyond the edge of existence." Vexitar's hands shook as he activated the main display system. The eyes screen filled with an image that challenged his understanding of what was possible. Admiral Patterson stood on the bridge of a ship that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Behind her, crew members worked at control stations that phased in and out of visible reality like living dreams. "Admiral Patterson," Vexitar managed to say, "we request immediate assistance against the entities that are destroying our civilization." Patterson's expression was patient but firm. "Chancellor, we offered you the opportunity to join us 3 years ago. You chose pride over wisdom. The consequences of that choice are now manifesting." The display shifted to show the truth of what humanity had become. Their ships moved through space in ways that made physics seem like a gentle suggestion rather than an absolute law. They existed partially in normal reality and partially in dimensions that folded space-time into impossible configurations. Around them, energy beings that Patterson called the architects flowed like rivers of conscious light. "The Gardeners are not our enemies," Patterson explained. "They are cosmic farmers maintaining the universe's capacity for growth and change. Civilizations that adapt and evolve are preserved and guided to new frontiers. Those that stagnate are removed to make room for fresh possibilities." Vexitar felt his pride crumble as the full scope of humanity's transformation became clear. They had not fled the galaxy in fear or desperation. They had graduated from it, while the Council had spent centuries maintaining the same social structures and following the same patterns. Humans had been quietly preparing for a journey that transcended everything the galaxy had to offer. "Please," Vexitar said, abandoning the dignity he had maintained for decades. "Our people are dying. Entire species are being erased from existence. Surely there must be something you can do." Patterson's image was joined by other human figures that seemed to exist in a constant state of transformation. Captain Morrison appeared, but his form shifted between solid matter and pure energy. Claire Murphy materialized beside him. Her consciousness apparently expanded across multiple dimensional layers simultaneously. "The Gardeners operate according to principles that extend beyond individual galaxies," Morrison explained. "They evaluate civilizations based on their potential for continued growth and development. Species that demonstrate adaptability and innovation are offered opportunities for advancement. Those that have reached the limits of their evolution are recycled into raw materials for new forms of consciousness." The display showed the truth behind the galaxy's structure. What the Council had considered the natural order of space had actually been a carefully maintained garden. The architects and other advanced beings had been guiding galactic development for millions of years, nurturing promising species and removing those that had exhausted their potential. "You evaluated us as inferior," Claire observed. "But we were the only species in the galaxy that continued to evolve. While you perfected your existing capabilities, we developed new ones. While you maintained your traditions, we invented entirely new ways of thinking and being." Vexitar watched helplessly as the display showed human settlements that existed in the spaces between galaxies. They had built structures from dark matter and crystallized time. They had learned to communicate with forms of consciousness that existed as pure mathematical relationships. They had transcended the limitations of biological existence while somehow remaining fundamentally human. The Council's rigid hierarchies and unchanging social structures marked you for removal decades ago, Patterson continued. "The Gardeners were scheduled to arrive eventually regardless of our departure. We simply chose to leave before the pruning began." "But surely some accommodation can be made," Vexitar pleaded. "We can change. We can adapt. Give us the opportunity to prove our capacity for growth. The three transformed humans exchanged glances that seemed to communicate across dimensions. For a moment, Vextar dared to hope that humanity's legendary compassion might extend to their former council colleagues. Individual members of council species have demonstrated adaptability, Morrison acknowledged. Dr. Amanda Foster and a few others showed promise for evolution beyond their cultural limitations. We have offered them the opportunity to join our expansion into the cosmic web. But our species as organized civilizations have passed the point where meaningful change is possible, Claire added sadly. Your social structures are too rigid, your thinking patterns too entrenched, your commitment to maintaining existing hierarchies too absolute. Evolution requires the willingness to abandon everything you think you know about reality. The display shifted one final time to show the advancing gardeners from humanity's perspective. The geometric entities were not destroyers, but gardeners preparing soil for new growth. Where they passed, space itself became more fertile for the development of advanced forms of consciousness. The civilizations they removed were not destroyed but transformed into potential energy for future evolution. The universe is vast beyond your current ability to comprehend, Patterson said gently. What you call the galaxy is merely one small garden in an infinite cosmic web of consciousness and possibility. We are moving on to explore regions where reality itself is still being written. And you will leave us to face extinction alone, Vextar said bitterly. You chose isolation when you rejected our offer of partnership, Morrison replied. The universe does not reward civilizations that refuse to grow. The gardeners ensure that stagnant species do not prevent others from reaching their potential. The transmission began to fade as humanity's ships prepared to depart for destinations beyond the cosmic horizon. Patterson's final words carried, across the dissolving connection with a mixture of sadness and infinite possibility. We learned that existence does not end at the edge of the galaxy, Chancellor. For those ready to abandon their birthplace and embrace the unknown, it is just the beginning. Perhaps in your next incarnation, your species will choose growth over pride. The display went dark, leaving Vextar alone in the chamber where galactic civilization had once seemed eternal and unshakable. Outside the station's windows, another star system vanished as the gardeners continued their methodical work of cosmic renewal. In the distance, barely visible at the edge of sensor range, humanity's fleet disappeared into the spaces between galaxies where consciousness itself was still learning what it meant to exist. They carried with them the transformed remnants of a species that had chosen evolution over comfort, growth over security, and the infinite unknown over the familiar limitations of home. Behind them, the galaxy continued its transformation from a collection of stagnant civilizations into fertile ground for whatever new forms of life the universe would dream into existence. The age of the Galactic Council was ending, but the age of cosmic consciousness was just beginning.